open primary here in Wisconsin is important. That means people can switch over. They can vote for whomever they would like, Democrats, Republicans. We have seen this across the country, people choosing between you and Donald Trump. Some union workers, we understand here, are very deeply considering whether they should vote for you or for Donald Trump. Do you think they're crazy? What do you say to people who are making that choice?
Well, I think we will get the vast majority of the union workers. Trump will get some, but I think we will get a lot more. I think what's going on, Erin, is there's a lot of anger in this country. For your average guy, he is asking why he has to work longer hours for lower wages, why he's really worried, or she is really worried. His mother's really worried about the future of their children. And yet almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. People are angry. What Trump is doing is taking that anger and saying, it's the fault of the Mexicans, or it's the fault of the Muslims, or we got to scapegoat people. Well, beating up on Mexicans who make $8 an hour is not going to deal with the real issues facing this country.
Are you, though, blaming rich people for it?
It's not it's not rich people, no. We are blaming an economic system right now where factually almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%, where you have billionaires and large corporations that are not paying their fair share of taxes. There are some major corporations make billions a year in taxes, stash their money in the Cayman Islands, don't pay a nickel in taxes. And what I want to do is to take that money, do away with that loophole, invest it in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. We can create 13 million jobs over a 5-year period with $1 trillion investment. That's roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants. It's not a question of blaming, it is a question of understanding the reality. It is a rigged economy. People on top are doing phenomenally well, everybody else is doing worse. We got to change that.
Susan Sarandon is a supporter of yours, as you know, the actress. She said some people feel Donald Trump will bring the revolution immediately if he gets in. Is Donald Trump more likely to bring about a revolution in this country? And you've been having revolutionary talk, I know, not of the violent sort, but in terms of making changes in this country. Is he more likely to accomplish that?
Well, I'm not sure I heard that. I really didn't hear Susan's context, Susan's comment within a broader context. I think Trump will be a disaster for this country. I think the idea of insulting women and veterans and African Americans and Mexicans and Muslims is precisely what this country does not need and does not want. Look, in every poll that I've seen, including a CNN poll, we were 20 points ahead of Trump. I do not believe Trump is going to become president of the United States.
You do win in those head-to-heads, of course, in the polling. We spoke to some female Donald Trump supporters yesterday in Arizona. It was a fascinating conversation about why they do believe in Donald Trump, why they support him. Here's what one of them had to say.
What you see is what you get with this man. And that is what I want. I like transparency. I like to know what I can expect. And I feel that he will deliver what he says. And there's just no secrecy.
You understand his appeal to women?
I do. Well, it's not only, no, I don't understand his appeal to women. I don't think he's particularly popular with women in general. You can't go around insulting women every day and expect to gain support. But I understand where that woman is coming from. Look, people are sick and tired of establishment politics. Politicians say one thing, they do another thing. You know, the Congress has a favorability rating of 15% or something, and Trump is, of course, very blunt and straightforward. But I think you got to look at what he is saying. Does that woman really believe that the billionaire class should receive hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks over a 10-year period? I doubt it. Does she not think that we should raise the minimum wage? Trump does not. Does she really think we should insult Muslims all over the world? I don't think she does think that. So I think the appeal of Trump is his bluntness, is his straightforwardness. And by the way, this guy is a good entertainer. He has done a very good job manipulating the media. He is a professional at that. And, you know, he has been successful doing it.
So let me talk about Muslims and the issues that he has brought up on that. I was in Brussels last week. I spoke to a young man who knows 10 to 15 people who have gone to Syria to fight with ISIS. I spoke to the brother of the Paris attacker, of one of the Paris attackers a few months ago in Brussels. He told me he knows many young men who are in Syria training to fight with ISIS, and they are coming back now. And yet, you can still, without a visa, get on a plane in Brussels and fly to the United States. How do you prevent these young men who say their ultimate goal is to attack the United States from coming here without racially profiling, as Donald Trump suggests?
You do everything that you can, and that means you have information, and that's what intelligence services are all over the world, and you share that information. And if people are going to Syria, if they're going to training camps, they are not going to come, or if they come back into Brussels, or they come into the United States, they're going to be arrested in 5 minutes. We have zero tolerance for people who are going to hurt Americans or people anyplace else in the
But
world.
intelligence services haven't been coordinating. When I know people in Brussels who said, my son, the bomber here, they said, my son is in Syria, and authorities didn't care. So if they don't know the names of who's there, they don't know who's coming back.
And no one is saying, first of all, let's look at the broader issue. Number one, in Iraq right now, ISIS is on the defensive. They have lost about 40% of the territory they controlled. And I believe that if we're smart, if we do a good job in training the Iraqi army and the Muslim nations, they can be destroyed in a year or two. That certainly is the goal. And second of all, we've got to do everything that we can. No one has any magical solutions, but we do have to improve our intelligence capabilities. We do have to make sure that federal, state, and local law enforcement is much better coordinated in preventing these types of attacks.
Before we go, federal officials, as you know, this week said they have unlocked the iPhone of one of the shooters in San Bernardino. Now, they had been suing Apple to force Apple to do just that. They figured out how to do it themselves. I know you've said you're fearful of Big Brother in America.
Yes.
But this is a terrorist's phone.
Right.
Is it a good thing that the FBI broke into it?
Look, I think that clearly we need to get all of the information that we can to stop terrorism. But at the same time, we have to be mindful that in a free society, you do not want the government, I suspect, into your telephone. Would I be correct in saying that? So what the correct balance is, what we have to determine. But I am concerned about civil abuse.
Even protecting someone's phone that
No,
you know
I'm not
went
protecting.
Americans.
That's the balance. Of course, you're going to go after people who are killing Americans. That goes without saying. But it is one thing to go after a terrorist. It is another thing to have millions of people having their emails or their websites surveyed when the vast majority of them have nothing to do with terrorism. So how you balance in a free society the civil liberties and the constitutional rights of our people, while on the other hand, going after terrorists, that is the balance that we've got to establish.
All right, well, Senator Sanders, thank you very much for your time. Nice talking to you tonight.
Nice to see you.